Montana Territory, 1882. The sun cast long shadows across the jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains, turning them to fire-tipped spears against a fading blue sky. Below, nestled in a valley carved by a silver ribbon of river, sat the rough-hewn town of Willow Creek. It wasn't much, a collection of weathered buildings that had grown haphazardly around the stagecoach stop, but to Adam Daniels, it represented everything he'd spent years avoiding. "The wilderness don't betray you," he muttered to his chestnut gelding as they approached the town limits. "People do." At 26, Adam had the weathered eyes of a man twice his age, though his face remained youthful beneath a light stubble, handsome in a hard-edged way that spoke of too many nights sleeping under stars and not enough sleeping under roofs. His broad shoulders carried invisible weight, memories of a family homestead burned to ash by raiders 5 years prior, leaving him the sole survivor and dedicated to a solitary existence ever since. Just supplies and gone, he reminded himself, adjusting his worn Stetson against the setting sun. No lingering. Adam believed that attachments were liabilities in a land where death came sudden as summer lightning. He'd fashioned himself into a competent loner, trapping, hunting, occasionally working cattle drives when money ran low. His skill with horses and ropes had earned him brief respect on the ranches where he temporarily hired on, but he never stayed long enough for anyone to know the man beneath the cowboy exterior. What he wanted was simple: enough supplies to get him through another season in his remote cabin, maybe a letter waiting from his mother's sister back east, though he doubted it. What he believed he needed was solitude, the comfort of quiet mountains and predictable dangers, not the messy complications that came with human connection. Yet as he approached the humble boarding house at the edge of town, something stirred in his chest, a loneliness so vast and hollow it momentarily took his breath. He dismounted, tied his horse, and paused to stare at the warm glow emanating from the windows. Inside, people were sharing stories, breaking bread, existing together. His hand tightened on his saddlebag. Just one hot meal before heading to the general store. That's all. June Tyler wiped flour-dusted hands on her apron and surveyed the dining room of her aunt's boarding house with a critical eye. At 22, she had taken over cooking duties after arriving from St. Louis 6 months ago, bringing with her the culinary skills taught by her late mother and a determination to make a fresh start after her father's business failures left them destitute. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though wayward strands had escaped to frame a face more striking than conventionally beautiful. High cheekbones, a determined chin, and eyes the color of a summer sky. "You're burning daylight, June," called her Aunt Margaret from the kitchen. "Those biscuits won't roll themselves, and we've got hungry men coming." June smiled despite her exhaustion. The work was endless, but it was honest, and more importantly, it was hers. Her pale blue dress, though simple, was immaculately pressed, a habit from her former life that she refused to abandon despite the frontier's more relaxed standards. "I'm not waiting around for some man to rescue me," she'd written to her childhood friend shortly after arriving. "Out here, a woman can make her own way if she's smart and works hard." Yet beneath her fierce independence lay a wound. The betrayal of a fiancé who had abandoned her when her father's fortunes failed, teaching her that men's affections were as changeable as prairie weather. Better to rely on her own capabilities than risk such pain again. The bell above the door jingled, and June turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the dying light. Something about his hesitation in the doorway struck her, like a wild creature uncertain whether to enter a human dwelling. "Evening," she said with the practiced pleasantness she extended to all customers. "Supper's nearly ready if you're looking for a meal." Adam stepped fully into the light, and June found herself momentarily stilling. Beneath trailed dust and evident wariness, she recognized something familiar, the look of someone carrying invisible burdens. "Just passing through," he said, voice rough from disuse. "One meal before I resupply and head back out." "Well, Mr. Just passing through," June replied with unexpected warmth. "You're in luck. I made venison stew and fresh biscuits. Best you'll find between here and Helena." Adam hadn't intended to smile, but something in her forthright manner caught him off guard. "That's quite a claim." "It's quite a stew," she countered, gesturing to an empty table. "Judge for yourself." As June turned to fetch him a plate, neither could have known that a spring blizzard was building in the mountains, a storm that would strand Adam in town for days, forcing him to take a room in the very boarding house where June's cooking would become his first taste of what he'd been missing all these years. The storm hit with fury that night, howling down from the mountains like a vengeful spirit. Adam stood at the window of his rented room, watching snow pile in drifts against the buildings, erasing the trail he'd planned to take at dawn. "Looks like you'll be our guest a while longer," said June, finding him in the parlor the next morning, staring out at the white wasteland. "No one's going anywhere for at least 3 days, according to Mr. Peterson at the livery." Adam's jaw tightened. "I need to get supplies back to my cabin." "And freeze to death trying? That would be poor repayment for the best stew between here and Helena," she teased, then softened at his obvious discomfort. "The general store isn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, I could use help carrying firewood. Most of our regular boarders are stuck at the mine." It was a simple request, practical and unthreatening, yet Adam hesitated as if she'd asked him to lay bare his soul. Finally, he nodded. "I can do that." Over the next days, as the storm raged, a reluctant rhythm developed. Adam chopped wood, repaired a leaking roof section, and helped with the heavier tasks around the boarding house. In return, June fed him meals that awakened memories he'd long suppressed, of family dinners and his mother's cooking before raiders had destroyed everything. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked on the third evening, accepting a second helping of chicken and dumplings. June's hands stilled briefly. "My mother. She believed food was more than sustenance. It was a way to show care when words failed." "My mother was the same," Adam admitted, surprising himself. Before what?" June asked gently. The question hung between them, an invitation Adam wasn't ready to accept. "Nothing worth telling," he said, retreating behind his customary wall. But something had shifted. That night, unable to sleep, Adam found himself in the kitchen where June was preparing dough for the next day's bread. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, not looking up from her kneading. "Haven't slept proper in years," he admitted, then added, "Cabin's too quiet sometimes." June nodded, understanding more than he realized. "I thought I'd love the quiet after St. Louis. Instead, I find myself baking at midnight to fill the silence." "St. Louis?" Adam leaned against the doorframe. "That's a long way from Willow Creek." "So is wherever you're hiding in those mountains," she countered, finally looking up with those clear blue eyes that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed armor. "I'm not hiding," he protested, but the words rang hollow even to his own ears. June smiled slightly. "We're all hiding from something, Mr. Daniels. The question is whether what we're running toward is worth what we're running from." The simple wisdom of her words struck Adam like a physical blow. What was he running toward, beyond mere survival? His cabin was shelter, not a home. His days were filled with tasks, not purpose. As dawn broke on the fourth day, the storm finally relented, leaving behind a transformed landscape glittering under a brilliant blue sky. The town began to dig out, and with the trails soon to be passable, Adam had no excuse to remain. "I'll be moving on tomorrow," he told June as he helped clear snow from the boarding house steps. She nodded, face carefully neutral. "I expected as much. I've packed some provisions for your journey. Payment for the repairs. You don't owe me anything." "Consider it thanks, then," she said, her gaze meeting his briefly before sliding away. Not everyone passing through bothers to fix what's broken. That evening, as Adam prepared to take his final meal at the boarding house, a commotion erupted outside. A wagon had arrived carrying 3 miners injured in a collapse during the storm. The doctor was overwhelmed, and June immediately transformed the dining room into an impromptu infirmary. Adam found himself pressed into service, holding bandages, fetching water, and witnessing June's calm efficiency as she assisted the doctor. Her hands moved with the same assured grace they showed in cooking, but now they stanched blood and offered comfort to men in pain. "You've done this before," Adam observed later, as they cleaned up after the doctor had stabilized the patients. June's shoulders sagged slightly with exhaustion. "My father's business was failing for years before it collapsed entirely. I volunteered at the charity hospital to earn extra money, learn more than I ever wanted about human suffering." For the first time, Adam saw beneath her capable exterior to the depth of experience that had shaped her. She was no naive girl playing at frontier life, but a woman who had faced hardship and chosen to keep moving forward. "I'm staying another day," he found himself saying. Those men will need moving to proper beds tomorrow. June's smile was tired but genuine. Thank you, Adam. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and something about hearing it in her voice made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with the day's exertions. One day became three as Adam helped move the injured miners to their homes and found other tasks that needed doing around the boarding house. June never questioned his extended stay, but something shifted between them, a quiet understanding that grew in the spaces between words. On the fourth evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the snow-covered mountains gold and pink, June finally asked the question she'd held back since his arrival. What happened to make you choose loneliness, Adam? The directness startled him, but after days in her company, he found he no longer wished to hide behind practiced evasions. Raiders hit our homestead 5 years back. I was checking fence lines miles out. Came home to find everything burning. Everyone gone. His voice remained level through years of practiced control. Figured it was easier not to build anything worth losing again. June's hand found his on the porch railing, a light touch that anchored him to the present. I'm sorry. What about you? He asked, needing to shift attention from his own pain. What brings a St. Louis lady to a rough place like Willow Creek? My father's failures left us with nothing. My fiancée decided poverty wasn't part of our arrangement. Her smile held no bitterness, only a matter-of-fact acceptance. When Aunt Margaret wrote offering a place here, I chose a fresh start over familiar humiliation. His loss, Adam said, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. June's laugh was soft. Perhaps, or perhaps I needed to learn that worth isn't measured by what others are willing to pay for it. The wisdom in her words settled around Adam like a warm blanket, and for the first time in years, the ghost that haunted him seemed less substantial than the woman beside him. The next morning, Adam finally departed for his cabin, his saddlebags heavier with supplies and his heart lighter than when he'd arrived. Though no promises were made, something unspoken passed between them as he mounted his horse. The first Sunday of every month, I make apple pie, June said simply. In case you find yourself passing through again. Adam tipped his hat, unable to trust his voice with the emotions suddenly crowding his throat. But as he rode into the mountains, the thought of June's apple pie became a marker on his mental calendar, a possibility he hadn't allowed himself in years. Spring came to the mountains in a riot of wildflowers and rushing streams. Adam found himself making excuses to ride into town more frequently. Fence wire needed, salt running low, boots requiring repair. Each visit included a meal at the boarding house, where June's cooking and conversation became the highlight of his increasingly less solitary existence. On a warm June evening, as they walked along the river after supper, Adam finally voiced the change growing within him. I built my cabin to keep the world out, he said, watching the water tumble over rocks. Lately, it feels more like a prison than a refuge. June studied his profile in the fading light. What would make it feel like a home? The question cut to the heart of his transformation. Maybe it's not about the place, he said carefully. Maybe it's about who shares it. Before June could respond, shouts erupted from town, frantic cries that sent them running back toward the main street where a crowd had gathered. Fire had broken out at the livery stable and was threatening to spread to neighboring buildings in the dry summer heat. Through the night, the town fought the blaze together. Adam worked alongside men he'd previously avoided, passing buckets and helping evacuate horses. June organized the women to provide water and bandages for those overcome by smoke or injured in the chaos. By dawn, the fire was contained, the livery a smoldering ruin but the rest of the town saved. Exhausted, smoke-stained, and victorious, the townspeople dispersed to their homes, all except Adam and June, who found themselves on the boarding house porch as the first light touched the mountains. You could have left, June said quietly, ridden back to your cabin when the alarm sounded. No, Adam said simply. I couldn't have. In that moment, both recognized the transformation that had occurred. The man who believed attachment meant vulnerability had risked himself for a community. The woman who doubted men's constancy had witnessed unwavering dedication. Summer bloomed fully across the territory, bringing with it a new rhythm to Adam's life. His visits to town became regular, his cabin less a hideout and more a way station between meaningful connections. June's cooking remained his excuse, but her company became his reason. They were returning from a community picnic by the river in late July when a rider thundered into town, his horse lathered and his expression grim. Morrow's gang was spotted crossing the North Ridge. He announced to the gathered townspeople. Sheriff thinks they might hit the bank when the mine payroll comes through tomorrow. A chill ran through the crowd. The Morrow gang was notorious throughout the territory, ruthless outlaws responsible for numerous robberies and deaths. Adam felt June's hand tighten on his arm, and he covered it with his own. "You should stay at the boarding house tonight," she said quietly. "It's not safe to ride back to your cabin with them in the area." Adam nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, calculating angles and recalling descriptions of the men who might very well be the same raiders who had destroyed his family years before. That night, as Willow Creek prepared for potential danger, Adam and June sat in the kitchen long after the other boarders had retired. "You're thinking of going after them," June said, not a question but a statement filled with understanding and fear. Adam's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "If it's Morrow, he was the one who led the raid on my family's homestead. I've been hunting him for years. And if you find him, what then?" June's voice remained steady, though her eyes betrayed her concern. "I thought I wanted revenge," Adam admitted. "To make him pay for what he took from me. Now I'm not so sure." "What changed?" Adam looked at her directly. The wall he'd maintained for years now completely dismantled. "I found something worth protecting instead of avenging." June reached across the table, her fingers intertwining with his. "Then protect it. Don't throw away what we're building for the ghosts of what you've lost." The simplicity of her plea struck deep, challenging the revenge that had sustained him through years of solitude. Before he could respond, gunshots echoed from the direction of the bank. Morrow's gang had arrived early, taking advantage of darkness. The town erupted in chaos as Adam joined the hastily formed defense. Sheriff Ellis organized the men into positions while sending the women and children to safety. June refused to hide, instead helping establish a medical station in the church. "Be careful," she told Adam as he checked his rifle. "I expect you back for breakfast." Her forced lightness couldn't mask her fear, but Adam found strength in it nonetheless. "Save me some biscuits," he promised, their private language for something deeper neither was ready to name. The ensuing gunfight was brief but violent. Morrow's gang, expecting an easy target, found instead a determined resistance. When dawn broke, 3 outlaws lay dead, 2 were captured, and Morrow himself was cornered in the livery ruins, wounded but dangerous. Adam approached cautiously, rifle ready, finally face to face with the man who had haunted his nightmares. Morrow was older than he expected, his face weathered by years of violence and flight. "You don't remember me," Adam said, keeping his distance. "But you burned my family's homestead 5 years ago. Killed everyone there." Recognition and then indifference flashed across Morrow's features. "I've burned lots of places, boy. Don't recall them all." The casual dismissal of his family's lives should have fueled Adam's rage. Instead, it revealed the emptiness of the revenge he'd pursued. This broken, bleeding man couldn't restore what was lost, and killing him wouldn't heal Adam's wounds. "Put down your gun," Adam said evenly. "Face justice proper. So you can watch me hang?" Morrow sneered, raising his pistol with desperate speed. Adam fired once, catching Morrow in the shoulder. The outlaw collapsed, his weapon clattering away, defeat finally registering on his face. "No," Adam replied, securing Morrow's hands with rope. "So I can get on with living." As the sheriff took custody of the wounded outlaw, Adam found himself surrounded by townspeople clapping his shoulder and offering thanks. For the first time, he didn't flinch from their contact or retreat from their gratitude. His gaze sought only one person, June, standing at the edge of the crowd, her face reflecting both relief and a new understanding of the man he was becoming. That evening, as the town celebrated their victory and mourned their losses, Adam and June walked to the ridge overlooking Willow Creek. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, transforming the humble collection of buildings into something precious. "I'm selling my cabin," Adam said without preamble. June turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "Why?" "It's your sanctuary." "Not anymore." He took her hands in his. "I built it to hide from the world, but I don't want to hide anymore. Especially not from this." The kiss that followed was gentle yet certain. The natural culmination of a journey neither had expected when a storm-bound cowboy first tasted a talented cook's stew. As autumn painted the mountains in fiery colors, Adam purchased the vacant lot beside the boarding house. The townspeople, now counting him as one of their own, helped raise a small but sturdy house where, on a crystal-clear October day, he brought June as his bride. Their wedding feast, prepared by June with help from every woman in town, became the stuff of local legend. But what the townspeople remembered most was not the food but the transformation they had witnessed. A lonely cowboy who had learned to trust again and a determined young woman who had found her equal partner. That night, as they stood on the porch of their new home, Adam wrapped his arms around his wife and looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once been his only companions. "You know," he said quietly against June's hair, "when I rode into town that day, I was just looking for a meal before heading back to my solitude." June turned in his embrace, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "And instead," Adam said, his voice rough with emotion, "you fed my body with your cooking and my soul with your courage. You made me remember what it means to be part of something larger than my own survival." "And here I thought I was just making venison stew," she teased, though tears shimmered in her eyes. "You were making a home," he corrected gently, "one biscuit at a time." As winter settled once more over the Montana territory, the little house beside the boarding house glowed with warmth and promise. June continued cooking for boarders, though now with an apprentice to help as her own family began to grow. Adam partnered with the livery owner, his way with horses becoming a valued skill in the expanding town. The wilderness remained wild, the frontier still dangerous, but Adam Daniels no longer believed he had to face it alone. In June's kitchen, first at the boarding house and later in their own home, he had found not just nourishment, but healing, not just a cook, but a partner who had shown him that love wasn't weakness but the greatest strength a man could possess. Years later, when their children asked how they had fallen in love, June would laugh and say, "Your father only wanted supper, but I fed him breakfast too." And Adam, gray now touching his temples but his eyes still bright with the wonder of their life together, would add, "And every meal since has tasted of home."